Hello, my name is Logan, and today I'll be continuing my faction video series on the Periphery. Though technically it's a large number of factions, I'm going to go over the basics on life in the Periphery and why it's often referred to as the Bandit Kingdoms. The Periphery refers to the region of space surrounding the inner sphere. The border between the Periphery and the inner sphere is generally 450 to 550 light years away from Terra. The Periphery is surrounded by the deep Periphery, though the borders of this region of space are more vague. The Periphery is littered with small colonies and a handful of interstellar nations, though most would not be recognized outside their borders. Although some Periphery colonies predate the Star League, this region of space remains sparsely populated and fiercely independent. Worlds within the Periphery tend to lack the amenities available within the inner sphere, including faster-than-light communication. However, the Periphery is not devoid of culture and civilization. Interstellar trade is common, and a handful of strong Periphery realms have emerged over the centuries. Always restless and rebellious, the largest Periphery states were subjugated to the Star League Defense Force Reunification War. Further, the Armis Civil War resulted in the destruction of the largest Periphery realm, the Rim Worlds Republic, and a lasting blame of the Periphery in general for all things wrong in the inner sphere. Though largely spared the horrors of the Succession Wars, Lost Tech development within the Periphery has been relatively stagnant. So the density of a settlement within the Periphery is directly related to the time of initial settlement, initial success, resources, and inner sphere interference. Resource-rich regions of the Periphery, including the Hades Rim and the Outer Sphere, developed colonies with relative ease. Colonial efforts in both regions slowed significantly, though, after the Reunification War. Extremely sparse populated regions of the Periphery also exist. The Draconian Rift is home to few Periphery colonies, mostly independent systems and small pirate havens. The Capellan Marches are also particularly sparsely populated. This small settlement is due to random chance of lack of viability. Further, the Capellan Confederation largely ceased its colonial efforts and maintained a proactive diplomatic stance towards the Periphery by the 25th century. So due to the large gap between the inner sphere and the Periphery, there are many stereotypes that make diplomacy difficult even at the most basic of levels. The common spheroid perceives the Periphery in one of three ways. First, there's little to nothing there, and the people that live there are stupid for doing so. Second, there's no centralized government, which means they're uneducated, poor, and unhealthy due to lack of modern medicine. And finally, the Periphery is where all the galaxy's pirates, thieves, and tyrants come from, and that they prey on the inner sphere for personal gains. But given the vast nature of the Periphery, bands of criminals are able to find refuge in this area and prey upon the weak. So generally, those in the inner sphere dismiss the Periphery nations as bandit kingdoms. But the gap in understanding also stems from those that live within the Periphery. Periphery denizens commonly harbor a grave mistrust, callous indifference, or ruthless social Darwinistic tendencies towards the government and people of the inner sphere. Upon discovery of most Periphery realms, the great houses of the inner sphere tend to lay waste to Periphery realms, further causing distrust. After the end of the Reunification War, the territorial period began. The economic and industrial burdens placed upon the Periphery crippled the Periphery and froze most major Periphery realm expansions for more than 400 years. Though generally not robust by inner sphere standards, the central governments of the Periphery were capable entities before the territorial period. The Periphery denizen has not forgotten these transgressions of the Star League or those who supported it. Prior to the fall of the Star League in the years 2600 to 2750, the major Periphery realms were forced to participate in the Star League High Council as non-voting territorial states. Territorial states were forced to pay steep taxes with little return. Those people who did not leave their homes to new colonies were gravely mistreated by the heavy-handed economic policies of the Star League, policies which ultimately led to the death of many worlds after the demise of the Star League. Though the Periphery has been self-reliant for centuries, the Star League Bureau of Economics, Agriculture, and Technology attempted to dissolve most of this independence to ensure that the Periphery would never leave the Star League fold. They attempted to do this through the creation of short-lived co-prosperity spheres. Shortly after the Reunification War, systems were forced to specialize in a specific industry and rely on interstellar trade for everything else in order to survive. The intention was simple: if a world revolted, an embargo would pacify the world relatively quickly. Massively unsuccessful, the co-prosperity sphere resulted in more famines, unrest, lost production, and outrage, and did little to avert the revolt during the trying times following the Reunification War. The program ceased expansion in 2602 and was all but resolved by 2612. 12. After the failed Co-Prosperity project, the Star League turned its efforts to two resources it could control: energy and water. Using the economic might of the inner sphere, the Star League outcompeted nearly all domestic production of water, purification equipment, and power plant equipment. Less than 3% of domestic industry survived until the fall of the Star League. The cessation of much of the interstellar trade that happened prior to the 28th century resulted in the demise of many worlds unable to generate power or purify their own water. Propaganda campaigns were also implemented during this time, and nationalistic activities were at best frowned upon by the local population. Not limited to media, propaganda also included higher education reforms in the 2670s and primary education reforms in the 2680s. These reforms increased literacy and basic education through some sections of the periphery. These reforms were really intended to inoculate periphery denizens attempting to increase loyalty to the Star League. To strengthen this statement, the common student in primary school would be forced through the following indoctrination daily: pledge allegiance to the Star League and the First Lord, meditate on the many benefits of the bountiful Star League has bestowed upon us, give a prayer of thanksgiving to the First Lord, and then turn to Terra and offer thanks. The woes of the periphery did not end there. The second invasion of the periphery, which was the migration of undesirables from the inner sphere, including the poor, uneducated, anarchists, and political and religious extremists, increased the economic burden of the already crippled post-war periphery economies, leading to greater mistrust. Though some of the periphery and deep periphery settlements were located well over 500 light-years from Terra, it was during this winter of discontent in which another outward migration commenced. This time, periphery denizens decided to migrate even farther away from Terra in order to escape the unwanted Star League. Inner sphere stereotypes of the periphery are not altogether unwarranted, especially given the history of the Armis Civil War. Today, many periphery worlds are indeed little more than hideouts and havens for groups of criminals, bandits, pirates, assassins, renegades, and deserters. Those who have resorted to violence and piracy often find it difficult to become legitimate. The lack of society and the presence of privateers make interstellar trade quite dangerous, reducing the availability of needed supplies, which in turn forces the locals to resort to more privateering in order to maintain their settlements, a clear, vicious cycle. For those who don't want to be found, the relative lack of centralized authority and communications in the periphery is well suited to providing refuge or seclusion. For just such reasons, large corporate interests also have colonized or occupied periphery worlds in hopes of conducting business beyond prying eyes and ethical constraints, a trend which began during the territorial period. However, the periphery is not simply a refuge for the fringes of society. Indeed, the most influential periphery realms can be compared favorably with those of the smaller inner sphere powers, with a greater degree of liberty and education. The relative freedoms of the periphery also have drawn refugees or deserters of the succession wars who sought peace for themselves and their families. Those living within the periphery also have a distinct set of core values compared to that with those of an inner sphere citizen. The majority of the periphery settlers and their descendants were individuals who lived without the relative comfort of inner sphere civilization. As such, the periphery citizen tends to care less for technology, large government, wealth, communications, or medicine and education. Hard living and self-determination are generally held in the highest regard with the majority of the periphery citizens. That's all I'm going to cover in this video. I hope you enjoyed watching it. In my next video, I'll be continuing to do faction lore videos. If there's a faction you'd like to see, please leave a comment below. Till next time, thanks for watching.